Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, audience, wherever you are, to this first episode of Polaris interview podcast. This interview podcast is today brought to you by the panel members Hans Vogel, joining us from Italy, myself, Alexander Wolfheze, and with a special guest today, Holland's prime journalist in the field that we are going to discuss today, Micha Kat, somebody that is famous in his own country, but also increasingly abroad, specialized in quite depressing topic, pedo networks, but also somebody that has proven his dissident status beyond any gram of a doubt, we can say, because he has actually been in jail for what he had said. Freedom of speech, of course, we have already discussed in the Polaris panel. We are of the opinion that very little of that is left. Nevertheless, we are going to today delve into the topic that is being censored probably most of all at this moment. And that will bring us to Epsteinological horizons. So we are going to be discussing an article today published on Hans Review by Hans Vogel, the high priest of globalism, of course, focusing in on the matter of Epstein. And I would ask Hans here to give a little bit of his reasons for publishing this article at this time, because I know, Hans, you are a historian interested in greater matters, generally speaking, but you did address today this issue, which is an issue that is actually belonging to the public domain in the most popular sense of the word, because of course the social media are full with it, the newspapers, they are full with it. What's the reason that you delved into this topic, and what was the thrust of your article?
Well, thank you, Alexander. Happy to be here also, and thanks to Micha for joining us today. Very important, very sort of significant that we're talking about this with you today. What brought me to write this article, I was thinking about the Epstein thing, and I don't like social media a lot. I do read things like broader articles, some more articles in depth. And what struck me is that there was this wealth of information, detailed information on all sort of aspects of the Epstein thing, and that nobody actually gave a sort of general framework of how to interpret it all. Because as a historian, I like events and I like facts and figures, but I always like to use them and to put them in a sort of general framework, because by themselves, facts and details do not mean anything. They only mean something if you can arrange them in such an order that they make sense, to make sense of what's happening. And that's what I wanted to reflect a bit on it. And I wrote this article because it struck me that the Epstein was just an instrument. He was important, he was powerful, but he was obviously not acting alone. And he was acting alone, for the Israeli Secret Service, but also for other Secret Services. I don't know which ones, but certainly there are some that were involved as well. But especially because he was involved obviously as a player in a bigger circus, bigger field, involving important countries like the United States, but also Israel, but also perhaps London or England and London. Maybe, I don't think the European Union, but sort of at least 2 or 3 countries. And power circles in those countries, deep states in those countries. So he was very important. And that aspect has been left out so far today from any analysis we have seen on Epstein. Maybe Dugan has written a little about it, but I think it tells us a lot about how the ruling elite governs us, and I think it's best to regard Epstein as a globalist and as a high priest and an executor of other people's wishes, other people's directives, as a high priest of a higher cause, the higher cause of globalism. And for whose interest it might be, for the Zionist state or for the United States empire, that's all still left to discover and to pinpoint. But basically, he was sort of an operative in a bigger system, And I want to explain that to the audience and to give the debate a direction that was more useful than just talking about all the little details and about all the lewd and horrible behavior that he displayed, because in that he was not the only one, not the first one, and certainly not the last one. Well, that's the reason why I did it. Yes.
Well, we have with us here Micha Kat. So, Micha, welcome to this program and thanks for joining us. We would like to ask your opinion about the current state of the Epstein affair. And I'm asking this because, of course, it's clear to everybody that we have reached some kind of a Rubicon here. The document release that has taken place recently, involving 6 million, no less documents apparently, is of course of a different order of magnitude than the releases that have taken place thus far. The repercussions have been also drastic and immediate, involving some quite high level people. And you have been, of course, following this affair from the very start. As a matter of fact, you know the background to it, you know the precedents to it, the historical background. And I would like your assessment of the current state of this Epstein affair and the degree to which it will affect the people that are in power, or the degree to which it doesn't affect. What is your opinion, Micha?
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. I'm very happy to join you guys to discuss this very important topic. Maybe at this moment the most prominent topic that there is at the moment. If you see the media and the social media, they are completely dominated by the Epstein story at this moment. Basically, I would say that there are two levels to approach this topic. And the first level would be a little bit, as you say now, that you are going to look at the individuals that are implicated, the high profile people, political, business people, royalty, and that you are just making lists of all the people that did horrible things on that island and on other locations, and that you're going to follow what is the fallout for these people. Like, for instance, at this moment, the world is very much focused on the United Kingdom with this guy, Peter Mandelson, who now is basically bringing down the Starmer government. I think that will happen. And also, the royalty is, the royal family in England is on the verge of total collapse of this as a result of this Epstein situation. That is just one example of personal specific implications that have huge ramifications for the political system of the country involved. There are, of course, much more examples of this, like in Norway, for instance, where a comparable crisis is unfolding as in the United Kingdom, also with the royal family, but also with a very important group of Norwegian politicians. I think Norway is in complete meltdown also because the affair is expanding and rippling through the whole country on all kinds of levels. You know, Hans and Alexander, that Norway is a very important country financially, and because of their oil richness and their wealth. That's, of course, the reason why they are implicated in the first place in this whole story, because it's a very powerful country.
The pension fund is very big, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the first level to approach this. But the other level is a little bit what Hans said, and I want to choose that approach for now. That is more to look at the overall historical importance of this affair and see what it means for the current state of affairs for the society at this point, looking to historical parallels in the past. Have we been here before? That is, of course, always a question that historians should ask. And then I think that we have to conclude that what we are now in the midst of is a classic example of a systemic breakdown. That means that we are now witnessing the total collapse of the governmental and societal structures that, we believed were the strong fundaments, or maybe not so strong. We believed that were the fundaments of our political system and our society. To put it in another way, it is now becoming mainstream. It is surfacing right now that in reality, everything is completely different than we always believed it was. The whole political system, the whole representative, election driven democracy, if I put it that way, that was all basically a lie and a smokescreen. I mean, of course, we saw this coming. Hans Alexander, we saw this coming. The rod was already manifest in many ways.
Yes.
But now, now you can see, it is like, when a ship is in big problems, maybe like the Titanic, it is not sinking immediately, but you have all kind of problems. The front deck is leaking. Then you have some problems with the steering wheel. You see that the machine room on deck 5 is having problems. So there's all kind of problems on the ship, all kind of problems, and the crew is running around to solve the problem here, to make some reparations there, to fix a leak there, and then everybody thinks, okay, well, the ship will continue, but it doesn't work that way, because at one point there are so many damage and so many different locations where everything is going wrong that the ship will sink. That is exactly what we are seeing now. Now it is clear to see for everybody that the whole system, everything was fake, everything was a lie. The elections were no elections. That was all a complete shit show, complete fake. The governments that were in place were not really governing us. Even the medical system, and the legal system, everything was a lie. Everything. That is the significance of what we are now witnessing. The medical science is no medical science. It's completely fake science. Of course, many people warned that the pharmaceutical mafia had too much power and that there was no real independent testing of pharmaceuticals, that it was all, corrupt. And of course, that is already going on for many years. But that was just one leak in the ship. Now it has become obvious that it is so pervasive and so all encompassing the whole system that, well, and that is, of course, a tremendous shock for everybody. This is such a huge wake-up moment, you can call it, but it is basically, I think the best comparison is that you wake up from a kind of a bad dream, and then you wake up and everything you thought that it was this way, and you don't know where you are. You are in a strange environment. I don't know where you are. Is that my own room? Which room is it? Am I on holiday? Is it a strange room? People don't know where they are. Everybody knows this feeling, waking up, and then you have this feeling, where am I? I don't know this room. I don't know this place. Mm-hmm. I think that is a little bit the feeling. Nobody knows where he or she is at this moment, because everything is fake. There is no certainties anymore. You have no clear points of reference that you can build on, that you can trust, because everybody's corrupt. I mean, when you go to a doctor, it's no real doctor. It is like a money machine for some kind of pharmaceutical company that only gives you some pills because he gets money from the factory that makes these pills. Politicians, everybody is lying, everybody is corrupt. So, yeah, that is, I think, a very shocking moment for everybody to really accept that this is the state of affairs right now. So where do we go from here? That is maybe something that my two partners in this podcast can reflect on now. I think that is a very important question. Where do we go from here? Because that is also now, I can see on the internet, a big debate. If this whole Epstein affair is something that will turn out to be for the good, or will turn out to be for the bad. Because you can also explain it that this is the manifestation of the reality that was always looming behind the screens that nobody saw. And now it comes to the forefront. Guys, this is it. This is now the real world that you live in. Accept it. Nobody has the power to depose us, to chase us away. We have everything. We have all the techniques to kill the people. We have 5G towers. We can radiate. We can roast everybody. One a push on a button and everybody will be roasted. We have the pharmaceutical industry. We can poison the drinking water. We're poisoning the food already. We are having the green terror. We can cut off your energy. We have everything. So you better accept us as we are now plain, as we are now manifesting ourselves. That is as a bunch of corrupt, raping, plundering, baby killing perverts. You better accept that because there's no alternative. We have everything. That could be the message of what's happening now. The other possibility, of course, is, and that is, of course, something that all of us hope will happen, that the shock that I described will lead to a kind of revolution or to a kind of global upheaval against these perverts that I just described, and that we can prepare ourselves for a bright new future with good people that are really governing as governing was meant, namely on behalf of the people, for the people. The pursuit of happiness that the American Constitution talks about, that is, of course, a very important notion, that the government will pursue the happiness of its people. That is a notion that nobody remembers anymore, but I think that was once the meaning of or the purpose of government. Not eating babies, not raping women, that is how it has evolved. What once started as making possible the pursuit of happiness for the people has fallen, has evolved in a horrible way to the opposites. So maybe we can get back to what the founding fathers, because that is for me still the blueprint of good governance, is what these people on the end of the 18th century wrote down. I think that is the best that humanity has ever put on paper when we talk about how a government should function, that we cannot go a little bit back to that situation step by step.
Well,
okay,
I think
that is it.
Yeah, Michael, I think Micha here brought up a very important part of the discussion. That is the systemic breakdown, which is evident, and the disorientation that results from that. So these are two big points, and Micha already brought to our attention two distinct possibilities. The first possibility of it being programmed such as a kind of a disclosure necessary for the new totalitarian, open totalitarian phase of the system. Or, and that's another option, that there is some infighting going on within the elite, because we are talking here about disclosure. In my view, what we are seeing is a partial disclosure. I do not think that all the documents and all the materials have been disclosed. And even if they have been, as far as the Epstein files is concerned, Epstein is just one player, maybe a quite big one, but only one player in a very large network. It is quite interesting that certain royal families are being put in the spotlight, others are not. Certain political groupings are put in the spotlight, others are not. Certain links are being made, others are not. Certain manipulations on the money markets are being disposed, others are not. And I think this can also point in the direction of infighting within the globalist combine. The globalist combine, let's say the people that rule the West, it may be that they are fighting between each other, trying to remove rivals. As we can also expect that even if there is a systemic breakdown, people will be fighting over the scraps, and people will try to hold on to whatever satrapy or province they can still govern and still hold on to. But of course, this is a very large historical question, and Micha has put this question to us. Your response to that, Hans, what do you think about Micha's assessment, and which option do you think is the most likely?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks, Micha, for your quite your lucid observations and your clear analysis. And I can wholly support what you said. I agree in broad lines with it, and in details also sometimes. But I think you're right about the two possibilities, the two ways in which things can develop, either for the good or for the bad, for the rest of us, for the hoi polloi. But I think that there is we should regard. I think we should regard the Epstein affair as a catalyst that brings out what has been happening for a long time already, because the system that we're living in, the system, the pillars that sustain the American empire, and especially what we're familiar with, the European part of the American empire, and some other parts like in Latin America, and they have been rotting away for a long time. We've been witnessing the decay of education, the intentional destruction of education in the Netherlands, for instance, when I was teaching at the university, and I think Alexander also knows it from inside, how the higher education in the Netherlands was destroyed. And first, the secondary education was destroyed, and then primary education was also destroyed beforehand. So the same with the law system. The legal system is absolutely corrupt. The same goes with the public administration, also corrupt. Everything, everywhere you look, like what you said in the medical industry, pharmaceutical industry, the care business, everything is corrupt and has been destroyed for a long, in the process of destruction for a long time. So it is not happening just out of the blue. And I think the Epstein thing accelerated everything as a catalyst. And I think I'm a bit more optimistic than you two guys, I think, because you've probably also had contacts with people who belong to the elites, the local elites in the Netherlands and also other countries. And I think there is a fundamental failure, default fault with elites. They're also inevitably always will suffer from hubris. An elite who has been in place for a long time, tends to bring about hubris among its members. We can do anything that we please, that pleases us. Anything we like, we can do, and we will never be punished for it. So they think they can act with impunity, and they have this total disregard for other people and for people lower in the ranks, which brings about hubris, of course, and that's hubris. And they think they can do anything and get away with it, and they're higher than God. Okay, and this eventually brings about their downfall. You cannot be in power. It's a bit like what you see in the opera Nabucco, in Verdi's opera Nabucco, where the king of, I think, Nebuchadnezzar, who thinks he is God, and then he's struck with blindness and sort of insanity, and he falls to the ground because he's so full of hubris that he can no longer sustain himself. His legs just give way, and he sort of under the weight of his body. So I think that what we're going to see is the breakdown of the system, and we'll see chaos and more chaos erupting. We'll see perhaps what has been told that happened in the last days of the Roman Empire, in the Western Roman Empire, after the Huns invaded, the collapse of the system. I think that we're heading for that. And,
I think.
Yeah, sorry. Please.
Yes, I think that what we are facing here, of course, undeniably has this aspect. What you're saying, it is a cumulative effect. So the system collapsing under its own weight. Finally, it's accumulated injustices, perversions, and so on. But I like also to attach some fault to the words of Micha Kat here. He said the pursuit of happiness. So at the end of the 18th century, that's written into the American Constitution. And here we see the utmost perverted version of that. So the pursuit of happiness on the purely individual level, exaggerated to the utmost, applied to the Epstein and his clients. But I think we should not forget what kind of figure Epstein actually represents. He is, of course, depicted as a monster, but in another way, he is a glamour boy. He is somebody that is an epitome of what people like. The person that is rich, that has chutzpah, that has the ability to make deals, who knows everybody, who travels the whole world, who does business from Mongolia to Ivory Coast, who knows everybody, who has not one country but is master of the world, having passports at his hands, changing them anytime that he needs. Somebody that is a true homo aeroporticus, somebody that has no country but has allegiance not even to one place but to many bank accounts all around the world. And I think this here, he epitomizes something that people forget, namely the aspirations of masses of people. And of course, Hans privately made a joke that we have now something like called Epstyle, yeah, Epstyle. And I think that's true. There is something about the man that is in fact fascinating for many people, because of course all spies are fascinating. I mean, there are great books written about people like Bruce Lockhart and Sidney Riley, spies from the past. In his article, Hans Vogel also points to a figure that I actually I had read about it one time, but I forgot about it. So from the deep past, so from the Stavitsky, yes, he is called.
Stavisky, yes.
From the Third French Republic. In that time, that was a very large scandal, and he was also a spy, of course. And there are very many similarities. In his time, he was something like Epstein would be now, right? And he was also a Jew. He was also an artist. He was also a Freemason. He was also a Ponzi schemer. And by the way, he is also supposed to have committed suicide, right? There's a beautiful movie made about his life and the affair. It is called Force Occulte, made by politically incorrect French cinematographer, Mami. He was executed after the war, no less, because he was supposed to be a Nazi propagandist. But in his movie, he exposes this Stavitsky guy and all the affair around it. And I think this ties into what I just said. It is a glamour boy, somebody that is being looked up to, that's fascinated, that movies are made about, that people want to associate with. And I think not only the clients, but also the victims. I mean, of course, offering large sums of money and helicopter rides and villa holidays to impressionable young girls is not a one-way process. It is going from two sides. And I think we should not forget the image that Epstein had before. He was no less than Bachelor of the Month in the 80s. He was declared as the most desirable bachelor available on the piece of real estate called New York. He was somebody involved with glamorous projects such as Victoria's Secret. And he was somebody that was a true Renaissance man, somebody that lived the life that many people aspire to and many people like to see in movies. People forget that. So to just depict him as a monster, it does not do justice to the true situation. I think he is a kind of a fall guy for many people, a lightning averter in a certain sense as well. And I do not think we should make too much out of him. I think to me it comes across, if I read the story, like he was a kind of a maitre d', a bellboy of the elite, somebody that just did the logistics of arranging things and networking activity. Of course, he was amply rewarded for that, but to make him the fall guy is also quite of ironic, because we should not forget that the true misdeeds are not just done by the enabler. The true misdeeds are done by his clients. And I think in this regard also, the Jewish position of Epstein is something that we need to consider, because it is very easy to blame him. He is part of this global conspiracy, somebody that is sitting in the spider's web and doing awful things. But he was just also just an enabler, somebody that let people do the things that they did. And looking on from the side, he seems to have been a man who observed and who recorded more than a person that was per se interested in the deepest perversions that are being disclosed here. That all being said, I hand it back to Micha Kat to give us his take on what it means for us to have to deal with this reality, because images and ideas that now are being put in the social media will not be erased from the collective conscience. I think they are making an imprint that is changing things, that are disorienting people, as you said. So, Micha, what do you think will be the follow-up of the current state of the scandal?
Yeah, well, I think if you want to really understand who Epstein was, I think I will use another metaphor. I think you already mentioned it. I think the best way to interpret Epstein is to see him as a spider in a very big web. So we should not look at the person of Epstein, not look at the spider, but we should look at the web. The web that was made by the spider, constructed by the spider, and that web, and that is so interesting, that is basically incorporating everything in the world that matters, from politics, medical, finance. He even was on the helm of the Bitcoin, as you have said. Basically, everything that matters, everything that is dominating and steering the future direction of society was managed by Epstein. And that is all the different files of a web. I don't know how many threads and files a web has. Many, maybe 14, 20, 25, 30, maybe you have. It's a lot. All these threads that together constitute the web were basically dominated by the spider in the center, Epstein. So that makes him much, much more important than you suggest, Alexander, that he really was. And what was the basic mission of this web of Epstein? And then we come to a very interesting notion that he was engaged in, and that is, of course, social engineering. He was basically reconstructing the whole world to make a complete new structure, to build a complete new world. And in this world, there were basically two groups, and this is already described many times. That is the elites versus the normal people that are always described as useless eaters. I think that is a very basic notion. That is the elites that were in the web, controlled and blackmailed by the spider, Epstein. So in this web where all these people like Bill Gates and the royals and the CEOs of the banks, and they are on the steering wheel, and the rest is completely useless, and they will basically be done away with. They will be raped, plundered, murdered. They will own the only function of these useless eaters is to serve these elites. The elites, they feast on them, they eat them literally, they rob them, they use them as slaves, whatever they want. And these useless eaters have no rights whatsoever, nothing. So that is the society that we can see evolving as we speak. And the basic driver of this whole new situation, and that is also something which is very prominent in the Epstein releases, is the notion of Jewish supremacy. Because I think that we should really interpret all this social engineering and all this opposition of elites versus useless eaters that have no rights, that can be killed, that can be raped, that are used as slaves. That these are the goyim, basically. That is written all over in the emails. There were emails that says that basically, this is the Old Testamental notion of the chosen people. I think basically Epstein is a tool in maybe the Old Testamentic doctrine of the Jews as the chosen people that will rule the world in the end. And this is exactly what they have been working on for all these centuries, all these decades, to in the shadows, everything about the Illuminati and the protocols of the wise people of Zion. These were all like small pieces that you can see, something is going on. Of course, the Holocaust, that was, of course, the most important way of silencing all the people that wanted to criticize the complete Jewish takeover of the world, because then, on the basis of the Holocaust, all the opponents could be neutralized by criminalizing them as anti-Semites and racists. This is still going on, although, of course, the Holocaust is now losing its power a little bit. But this is, I think, what
due
is
to
going
Gaza.
on.
Sorry, a
So
lot.
yeah, exactly, Hans. And that is very interesting. I already sent you this, that now they're talking about 6 million pages. That is fascinating in the light of what I'm saying now. That's really, you don't make this up. Maybe I make too much of it, but I think it is very tempting to see this 6 million pages. Yeah, Hans knows about the 6 million spell that has been there maybe for 150 years already. That they first started talking about the 6 million in relation to the Jews. And there is something really magical about this 6 million number. It was, so maybe we should interpret this whole situation as a Jewish, Old Testamental, biblical takeover of the Jewish people. Yeah, as I described it, I think that is basically what's going on here. Yeah, so yeah, it is crazy, but okay. I hope that you understand what I'm saying here. But it is, yeah,
Well,
it is.
this
Yeah,
what you're saying, of course, it fits in very well to a topic that Hans and Sietse and I have discussed earlier, Zionization and Israelization. Zionization being kind of a religious or an ideological stance, which means that there is a project in the world more important than anything else, overriding national sovereignties, overriding ethnic identities, national interests, and so on. And then Israelization, which is rather a technical process of implementing techno-totalitarian schedules, techno-totalitarian measures, such as being experimented, of course, in the Holy Land on the Palestinian people, being implemented there first, and coming to Europe. So surveillance, kill systems, control systems, and so on. So these two tendencies are objectively there. Of course, there is now this exposure, the exposure of the people that are in power, showing themselves to a certain extent. And this brings us to the question that has also been partially addressed by Hans in his article, and that is the nature of the elite and the ideology of the elite. But the nature of the elite, Hans, he focuses on the recruitment problem that any
yeah,
elite will face, which of course brings up a very ironic phrase, the need for fresh blood, right? In the sense of who is going to be the next generation, because whatever longevity projects and eugenic projects the elite is pursuing, they are still mortal, at least at this point, and they need to be replaced by new generations. So this is a problem. And of course, it is well known that all kinds of forms of initiation rituals have been used by elites throughout history to replace themselves. And Hans brings this up. He brings up club membership, fraternity membership, and the rituals that belong to it. He hints at them. And his article is, of course, not for nothing entitled The High Priest. So this is, I think, a very interesting issue. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, Hans? So the nature of the elite and the ideology that is hidden behind this nature, the ideology that is only coming out in part, as far as we can see, but more open than ever before. Hans.
Well, I can also partly sort of answer your question from my own personal memories, because when I started studying at Leiden University, which is supposed to be the Harvard on the Rhine, as we have well, it auto-denominated Harvard on the Rhine, which is a case of death, of course, if you do that. But it used to be the flagship Dutch university, and I was a member of this organization called Minerva, which is a big fraternity, and it has a whole lengthy initiation process, a hazing process. And it had always struck me that when I was among these, well, other students, that they had no notion, no political notions of anything. Because I was, maybe you had the same thing, but usually when I was in school, high school and early university years, I was very politically conscious. I read about politics and about interests me a lot, political affairs, political things, politics. But most of the people around me, they were not interested at all. They were just interested in other things, in sort of things that seemed strange to me. That were not sort of tied to their age and their position as young students, getting out, setting out to know the world and to learn the world, how it functions. They were not curious about that. They were curious only about, well, sort of pedestrian things, parties, what have you. And I think the same thing goes on in fraternities everywhere else. It's about drinking, how many beers you can drink, how many beers you can drink without getting drunk, this sort of thing. There's sort of an initiation rite thing. How long can you stand up when you're drunk? How do you feel the next day? This sort of thing, this sort of macho type thing, initiation type thing, was very important, and I thought it was very strange. Could not be rhymed with the position in their lives as young students learning about the world. And I think the same thing goes, you see among the people that sort of allegedly were initiated by Epstein. They don't care about what really matters, but only about sort of doing nasty things to babies, young girls, what have you, and to drink a lot and to have a lot of cocaine up their nostrils. You see, it has all this. This has everything we read about what happened at the Epstein Island is sort of silly, fundamentally silly. It's criminal, but it's also silly. It's so simple, so flat, so without any content. And I think they need that kind of people in order to fill the ranks in the upper ranks of the elite. Because if you want to have people that you can manage, that you can control, that you can tell what to do, you don't want to think too much before carrying out the orders that you give them. So you need to have obedient people, people who don't ask questions, people who brave or who duly follow whatever orders they get from above, who imitate the same. If one guy wears a certain kind of pants, certain type of pants, the other guys want to have the same kind of pants, this sort of thing. They imitate each other, and they form this group sentiment is more important than their individual feelings, than their conscience, their intelligence, and everything else. I think that's the kind of people that you need for an elite, and that's how they're recruited also in the fraternities, and that's the same mechanism goes on in all the other stages of the system.
Micha, you brought up an interesting thesis. So we're talking here about the nature and ideology of the elite and the recruitment of the elite. But you, Micha, mentioned the possibility that this is it. This is the unmasking. Perhaps this is the time that the shadows are expelled and things are brought out in the open daylight. This means the techno-totalitarian system and satanic kind of globalism that has been hidden is trying to go and take center stage without any further hiding mechanisms, shielding mechanisms. This is an interesting question. I would actually agree with you that this is a distinct possibility, even although maybe it's not completely pre-planned. Maybe it is, maybe not. In any case, I like your take on that. Do you think that is possible, Micha? That they are going to implement a straightforwardly satanic world governance elite, showing its practices, forcing people to acquiesce to it, and carrying it like people in the past, in the Roman times, they carried the reign of Tiberius, Caligula, Nero, or Elagabalus. How is he called? There's this other emperor.
Elagabalus, yeah.
Elagabalus.
Yeah.
So these people, do you think that is possible, and how would that work, Micha?
Very, very well formulated, Alexander. I was thinking exactly along the same lines, also on the basis of what Hans just explained about his elites, because that is the most important notion when we talk about the whole Epstein situation, is elites versus useless eaters. That is basically the whole situation, the whole opposition of two groups in society. And that is exactly what I always call a medieval situation, going back to the Middle Ages, where you exactly had that kind of social structuring. You had the nobility versus the normal people. And that is exactly how it was. The normal people paid their fines and part of their harvest, and it called teens, or their fur. They even had the jus prima noctis. You know that what that is? That they had the right, if people from the useless eaters married, then the overlords, the elites, had the right, the jus prima noctis, that they, before the groom could consume his bride sexually, then the overmaster could go first. He had that right if he wanted that. That is, of course, very symbolic and a very powerful notion about how the society was structured at that time. And that is, of course, exactly the kind of society that the Epsteinians want to reintroduce. And then, of course, who are these elites? And then I come back to what I said in my previous contribution. That is absolutely the Jewish elites. Of course, we all know already the stories that were already spread maybe 50 years ago. I think even Adolf Hitler started with that, saying things like all the media are completely dominated by Jews. The banking sector is completely dominated by Jews. It suddenly started to puzzle people that all these positions were taken basically by Jews, and that has since then, since the Second World War, not diminished. I think it has become stronger, increased, more prominent. I saw videos like in Hollywood that all the people that are prominent in Hollywood, be it actors or producers or scriptwriters, they are all Jewish. So that was like a creeping takeover of the world. And that was, of course, made possible by the Holocaust situation that was used, of course, as a kind of insurance policy for this takeover, that they always had the insurance that they could play the Holocaust card if things could go wrong. And they did this all the time. And in the meantime, every time they played the Holocaust card, more Jews were positioned in crucial positions of power. And we have, of course, this is also underlined, of course, by the predecessor of Epstein, which was Robert Maxwell. I think this connection is getting more and more stronger as more information comes to the surface, that Epstein was basically the successor of the project that Robert Maxwell started on behalf of the Israeli deep state government, the Mossad. And now the information has come to the surface. Maybe you also noticed it, that Robert Maxwell started to blackmail the Mossad because he needed money. And he wanted the Mossad to give him 400 million. Yeah, it was that, and then they pushed him out of in the sea, out of the jar. That happened in 1991. Yeah, that's really, and then the whole operation, this whole creeping, secret, blackmail-driven takeover, came in the hands of his daughter, Ghislaine, who was already working with him, because she had, of course, all this context in society. She was a perfect assistant for her father. And Epstein was already in the network of Robert Maxwell. And then, of course, Ghislaine needed a new boss, so to speak, a new guy that she could be coached by. And then they became a tandem, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. But it was all in the implementing of the same agenda that was already completely set by Robert Maxwell. That is, I think, the story, and that is, of course, from a historical point, very interesting, because we are now talking about a plan, about a project that is basically at the heart of the Jewish of everything that is Jewish. What is the meaning of Jewry? What is the essence? What is the essence? What is at the core of the Jewish faith? What is Jewry all about? Is it about faith, or is it about power? Is it about religion, or is it about subjugation of the goyim? And now it comes to the light that is basically all about power, as also you can read in the Old Testament, of course, where the armies of Israel are really instructed to basically kill off all the pagan people, even slaughter their animals. And this is what Netanyahu is also saying more and more. And then he has all kind of biblical references, and he's talking about Amalek and all kind of crazy things. So you can see that this Jewish supremacy notion is getting more and more prominent. It's popping out all kind of holes. Yeah, and this is, of course, extremely alarming. And what I should also bring into play at this point is, of course, and this is also now that's something that people opens their eye for, is that the whole Islamic threat basically is a part of the Jewish playbook to let the Christians and the Islamists wipe each other out, to roll out the red carpet for the Jewish takeover. This is all by design. This is something that people now also start to see. So, to conclude this segment, I would say that we are now witnessing the complete Jewish takeover of the world. And one of the last things I want to mention, and this is also very characteristic of Jewry and of Jewish politics, is, and I think you both know that, and this is something that too few people want to acknowledge, and you see it now with Netanyahu, and basically you see it in the whole short history of the State of Israel, is that Jewish politics, everything is allowed. Everything is allowed. There are even killing your own brother, eating your own babies. I think that is the hallmark of Jewry. There's no rules, no laws. You can do everything to get to your to the fulfilling of your project. Everything. So all the famous stories about Jews that kill off their Jewish competitors if they can take over their business, and this is so typical of the Jewish way of doing business. So. Where do we go from here? Where do we stand from now? It is, I think that these Jewish intellectuals, these people did a very good job, because they have been thinking about this for a long time, and I think they have basically brought into consideration all kind of potential setbacks and scenarios, it will be very difficult to thwart what they have in store for us. I would say that. I don't know.
I think that what you brought up is quite interesting. Of course, there are many people that have been saying something along similar lines. I like to point people to an article I wrote. It's called The Heresiarchs. So, heresy being, of course, abstaining from orthodoxy and religion and going in a different direction. In that article, the heresiarchs, I have pointed out to the antinomian. So the antinomian habits of the elite that is sitting right now. And antinomian, of course, it has a very specific meaning. It is not just that you do everything that you want. It is that you actually actively go against God's commandments. You turn them around. You invert them literally. So, for example, on the Shabbat, certain things in Jewish traditional jewelry are forbidden. And in the antinomian version of that, those things exactly take place on the Shabbat, certain kind of activities. Then there are purity rules, which are systematically broken in antinomian sects. People can look it up. In any case, the question remains what Micha is asking, the final question. What will be the end result of that? What will be the end stage? And he brought up the totalitarian nature. And I think here there is a better word that also does justice to the analysis of Micha Kat, and that is techno-totalitarianism, techno-feudalism. This techno-feudalism is, of course, also a term that has been used by Varoufakis, an economist. He is seeing the world economic system changing into a techno-feudal system, which, of course, means that there is just a slave class ruled by a very tiny elite. And the slave class is being culled regularly and is being subjected to atrocities according to the measurements that are convenient for the ruling elite. That does not, of course, mean that it is an entirely Jewish project, because there are plenty of goyim, non-Jews, enthusiastically participating in it and steering towards it, including some very Aryan tech billionaires and so on. They are doing their part. This is their vision as much as the vision of the antinomians, heresiarchs, that are undoubtedly part of this elite. And I think it is a very interesting question to talk about how, to what extent is this feasible at all? So the implementation of techno-feudalism. But I think we should conclude our program today with thinking about this. So I will give first the word to Hans Vogel. What do you think will be the end stage? What is the end stage that this project, this larger techno-feudal project will bring us to? What do you predict, in other words?
Well, the end stage is, of course, what you just described, and what Micha described is what the elite, the Jewish elite wants and has in mind, and their collaborators from other sort of denominations and other categories. And this is when I think that I hope, well, my hope is stronger than my analysis here. There's also China, and there's the Muslims in the world, countries like Indonesia, where Jews are not welcome, and that doesn't welcome people with an Israeli passport, for instance. And there will be more countries like that. So the world will at least be divided, or stronger divided than it is today. And perhaps the way ahead is the Chinese. The Chinese just want to do business and don't want to control the people. They have their traditions and their cultures, and their cultural habits, and they can export them, and we can adopt them if you want to. We're not forced to do that. We're not forced to eat Chinese food the way we were forced to eat American food. We will not be forced to see Chinese movies and enjoy Chinese music the way we are forced to to consume American music and American movies. So perhaps the Chinese are the only true representative of a multipolar world, which is what I hope we're heading for, and which I hope will be the future of the world. So far, I can see only trouble ahead. Although the one thing that sort of comforts the comforting thought is that there's no military strong enough to withstand the militaries of the Russia and China, because everything we have in the West is inferior as far as technology is concerned, or as far as organization is concerned. So if ever comes to a kinetic encounter, I think the Chinese and the Russians, especially the Chinese, will gain the upper hand. So I think that we're heading for a world in which the Chinese will be superior. That's what I hope, and that's what I think.
I do believe that something like an anti-globalist and anti-satanic crusade is in the making. I think there are people stating it explicitly as such. Professor Dugin in Russia, not the least of them, but others as well. The Islamic Republic of Iran, of course, has always called its enemy Shaitana Bozorg, the great Satan. So recognition of the state of the West is alive in many quarters outside of the West, in the Eurasian East and the global South. Resistance, of course, is not only limited to the places we just mentioned. Also, there are many parts of the global South, including smaller countries, that are fighting and resisting with all their might. And I think this global anti-satanic crusade is gaining steam. I think what I sense is that there is a true resistance arising. That does not, of course, mean that there is any certainty to predict to whether this anti-globalist project is going to work and to what extent it's going to succeed. In any case, I will give the last word to our special guest today here, Micha Kat. Your estimate for, let's say, the short-term future, Micha.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting that Hans brings China into play and also Russia. I think that you can really conclude that they will be outside this satanic Jewish takeover project. There are completely different forces at play in Russia at the moment and also in China. But the rest of the world, I think it will be very difficult for them to escape this techno-feudal takeover. I'm very happy with that description. Yeah. Of course, there is exactly at Alexander. There is a lot of resistance and a lot of anger and a lot of rage among the people. You can see it every day. And that brings, of course, the question to the forefront if that will be enough to stop this techno-feudal takeover. Well, that is, I have good hopes that it will be. Maybe in some countries it will, in other countries it won't. I am very hopeful now for the United Kingdom and for France and for Germany also, the big three in Europe, because I see that the European Union now and Europe is so weakened and so they have lost so much control power that I am really hopeful that there will be some governments that can take over, patriotic governments that will bring back common sense in politics, like the AfD in Germany. Yeah, we see it in France. Everywhere it is gaining force. So I'm very hopeful for the United States also. Well, yeah, it is. We are in the middle of this war, and what is the hallmark of a war is that it is very difficult to predict what way it will go. Look at the Second World War. Even in 1943, it was still very, very difficult to see which direction things would take. Even in 1944, it was still difficult. You had the secret weapons of Adolf Hitler that he was still working on that could be ready any moment to be launched. He even had UFOs ready for combat. It is still a mystery why he did not use these UFOs, although There are reports that he did use some, but that is, of course, very interesting, another subject. But in the end, it didn't work out for him. Well, okay, that was the outcome then. What will be the outcome now? There are, of course, a lot of secret weapons. I'm very afraid of the 5G towers in combination with the vaccinations. For me, it is still one of the most troubling things that happened in the last 5 years is how they were able to put the whole world full of those 5G towers exactly at the moment that everybody was in lockdown for the COVID. I mean, that was such a coordinated worldwide. There must be such a strong force behind that, such an overreaching power that had control over the whole globe. I mean, even in Brazil, everywhere you have these towers. I mean, what's going on? No democratic control, no budgeting. Where's the money come from? Nobody knows really anything about it. Not even not what they are meant to do. So that is very alarming. I still have the nightmares that Epstein, to conclude this segment with this horrific image, Alexander and Hans, we were talking now more than an hour, but in the end, the only thing that can happen maybe is that one of the Epstein people, or maybe Epstein himself, because now we know that we learn that he's still alive, that he pushes the button and we all get roasted by these 5G towers. I mean, this is basically in the end what he wants. Depopulation, kill everybody. And then, of course, we also have these reports of the dungeons for the elites underground. You know about that, that they built, that they spent billions and billions. Even in The Hague, they are building new underground constructions in the Binnenhof. Nobody knows what's going on. No footage has ever been published, no videos. I mean, they're working on this now for 5-6 years. It is completely crazy that nobody knows what's going on there. I think what they are building there is these dungeons for when the 5G towers start radiating, they're deathly, and everybody, the useless eaters, will be roasted, and then the elites are sitting under the Binnenhof, or in Berlin, Tempelhof, you know about that. They wanted to make a new airport there, but nothing happened, and then they spent 8 or 80 billion also building. So this is a little bit the overview how things could work out. But what do I know? I think that we made a very good analysis in this. Well, what is it? More than 1 hour and 10 minutes. All kind of different aspects of the Epstein situation. I don't know if the end conclusion will be optimistic or pessimistic. That's always hard to say. But maybe a little bit more pessimistic than optimistic. What do you think, Alexander?
Well, thank you very much for winding up this interview in an appropriate way. I certainly do concur with you that whatever the perspectives on the longer term, for now we are living under Epsteinocracy. This episode was brought to you by the Polaris team, Hans Vogel, with a special guest star today, Micha Kat. We hope to see you again. Thank you all for attending, and thanks to our audience for tuning in, and goodbye.